Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We are excited about today's presentation featuring Ido Geffen, Vice President of Customer Experience and Support, and Rich DeFabritas, Senior Director of Product Marketing, both of CyberMDX. Rich and Ido will discuss how to conduct an ongoing risk assessment of all your connected assets and recommended actions to remediate or mitigate the risks associated with these assets on three distinct layers of protection: on device, on network, and on perimeter. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, CyberMDX. CyberMDX provides a single place to view and prioritize all device groups. They will tell you where to start and what to do next. They work with you to enable faster response and with fewer required hands. They research, track, alert, validate, analyze, and help you comply. You won't need to re-architect your network because they believe it's about layering protection around medical and IoT devices. For more information, please visit cybermdx.com. A few announcements before we get started. If you haven't already registered for our upcoming MD Expo, please do so today. We will be in Dallas, Texas on April 16th and 17th. Details, registration, and our steps to a safe and clean meeting environment are available at mdexposhow.com. While you're there, make sure to sign up for our newsletter so you will always have the most up-to-date information. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday webinar t-shirt by answering the following question. In what year was CyberMDX founded? You can answer the question by using the questions feature on the GoToWebinar dashboard. As always, today's webinar is eligible for one continuing education credit from the ACI. You can obtain your certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We will wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar by using the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, our presenters today are Ido Geffen and Rich DeFabritas. Rich, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm not going to give you the answer to get the t-shirt for the Webinar Wednesday question, but I would like to talk to you a little bit about CyberMDX and then just set the table a little bit by going through sort of state of healthcare cybersecurity. So a little about CyberMDX. Our mission is to enable healthcare delivery organizations like your own to provide quality care by securing and protecting the systems and devices they rely on every day to treat illnesses and save lives. And we do this through a very unique paradigm, something Ido will get into, we call Device-Centric Risk Management, or DCRM, which is basically a method of layering security around your medical devices so you can remediate and mitigate any issues right on the clinical assets themselves. We've been cited by analyst firms like Forrester and Frost & Sullivan as a leader in the connected medical device security and IoT security space. We've won numerous awards, most recently the Cybersecurity Excellence Gold Award. We have a great client list, including Metro Health, Mainline Health, Englewood Health, Asuta, which you can see here. And we also have a fantastic research arm that works very closely with organizations like CISA and the FDA to identify vulnerabilities in medical devices themselves. So we also work closely with the manufacturers to identify them and rectify them so that we make everybody a little safer through that. Next slide, yep. A little bit about what's happening in the industry, and some of you may know this, some of you may not, but what we call the healthcare's perfect storm, right? First and foremost, the proliferation of connected medical devices and IoT devices, it's growing at a very rapid pace. And you can see here from the graphs, the total number of IoT devices number in the billions. We're up to we're over 8 million or 8 billion right now. It'll be somewhere close to 25 billion in 2030. If you looked at the estimated percentage growth of connected medical devices, and this is a little older, 2018, but roughly about 50% of all devices are connected in a typical hospital. By 2023, that'll be almost 3/4 or almost 70%. Compounding that, right? So you have a number of connected medical devices and IoT devices coming online. The cyber attacks against healthcare are increasing. If you're not aware of this, you should be. Healthcare is by far the most targeted sector. You can see here the pie chart, the 2021 Horizon report that shows the total number of breaches across multiple verticals. 79% of these are healthcare breaches. Okay, PwC has noted that the number of cyber attacks against hospitals since the COVID pandemic or the COVID outbreak has jumped over 500%. Nearly 93% of all hospitals have experienced a data breach since 2016, Q3 2016. So you're talking about a very significant number of attacks, compounded again by the number of connected medical devices. But let's take a look at the medical devices themselves. So if you go to the next slide, Ido. The devices themselves, it's questionable or it's concerning the posture, cybersecurity posture. So here's a real example of a typical hospital has just about 90 CT scanners. And what we found was about 55% of those devices were running what we call like a deprecated operating system or an end of life, end of sale, unpatched, older operating system. We're talking something like Windows 7. It's not even supported any longer. 42% of them have what we'll call a critical vulnerability with a CVSS score over 9. That's out of a 10 scale, 10 being the most severe, including wormable ones. And 76% or 3/4 do not run an endpoint protection agent. So now you can sort of see the picture. You've got a ton of these devices. They're not really protected, and the number of attacks on hospitals is increasing and getting broader. That's the perfect storm. So we go to the next slide, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Okay, so if you look at just the number of vulnerabilities or the trend, it's growing, right? And it's growing pretty significantly. And then the mean time to exploit these, or the average time to exploit the vulnerabilities, is just over a month. Okay, so it's not really difficult for a threat actor to breach a device or breach a hospital, particularly when there's really not much in place to secure or protect them. And that's really what's happening here. So perfect storm is probably why you're here. It's also something that we're going to talk much about. But just before we get into what Ido is going to cover, I have one more slide. Sorry, I was going to say these risks cost money and could cost lives. Okay, so and I'd also throw in there reputational risk. You don't want to get hacked. You don't want to have a breach. The average breach incident costs a hospital just over $7 million. And there is a double-digit surge in the volume of healthcare data breaches happening. Okay, so the growth of these is pretty significant. I did say it could cost lives because you can imagine part of these breaches, ransomware is rising significantly. Hospitals will typically pay a ransom if there's a ransomware attack, and they're often advised not to do that. But imagine a situation where they don't, and all the devices are shut down, and these are life-saving devices. It's not out of the realm of possibility that human lives could be lost or impacted as a result. So the problem is more than just a financial or reputational one. It is a potentially life-threatening situation. So now I should have my poll slide up. Thank you, Ido. So first question, and same with the other questions that were asked earlier, use the questions or chat area of the GoToWebinar interface. Who in your organization is leading the initiative to secure medical devices? Is it your biomedical or clinical engineering group? Is it IT security or CISO if you have one? Is it IT networking or a CIO organization? Is it compliance or is it some other organization? So I'll give you a few seconds to enter something in there. And oh yeah, I see a few. Yeah, security, right? Networking, good. Good stuff. If you don't know where it is, I would suggest make it a point to get close to the people that do it or understand it, because this is something that impacts everybody within your organization, and it's something that you should be, very cognizant of and aware of moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ido Geffen. Ido, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. So now let's look on the real challenges and how they look like, and I will try to cover on this webinar more in depth about what should you do, where should you start, and basically trying to provide you the basic tools in order to understand where you're standing and what are the tools that you have in your hands in order to improve your situation. So the first piece is really trying to understand what are the main challenges that we are seeing today in protecting hospitals and specifically medical devices. So I think that the first thing that comes clear to us is the importance of visibility of IoT and medical devices. One of the first questions that we like to ask the biomed team and also the IT team, information security, before that we are starting, let's say, a proof of value or a deployment, how many connected devices do you have? How many of them are you aware of? And our statistics is more than 30% in the number that we are getting after that we are doing the deployment than the amount of devices that the staff was familiar with. It happens many times that the CISO is very surprised to see all kind of printers that he didn't know that are connected. And many times even the biomed personnel are not aware of the amount of infusion pumps, glucometers that are connected today to the network. And of course, the track on all of this data and what is connected and what is the exact model version, application version that is related to any of your devices is something very hard to do manually. And this is the first thing that we're trying to tackle, the visibility piece. Now that we are moving forward and also looking on the devices themselves, so we do really see that medical devices are the weakest link with regards to security. Most of them you are unable to put an antivirus or that I barely can see, like advanced endpoint security solutions like EDR that are applicable to medical devices. The medical devices are hyper connected. I mean, the amount of connected devices that we are seeing in hospitals are pretty tremendous. And more than the fact that we're seeing a lot of connected devices, the fact that most of them, sometimes even more than 50%, are unmanaged devices. And when I'm saying unmanaged devices, it means that it's OT devices like HVAC systems and building automation, security cameras, UPS devices, and of course, a lot of medical devices. So we see a very long tail of different types of connected devices that is very hard to track upon, and also, of course, to take care of the security posture of all of them. The traditional IT tools that are, traditional IT tools that are your IT or cybersecurity personnel in the hospital have right now are not tailored for the specific needs of hospitals. For example, the fact that there is also a lot of compliance issues. For example, if the device is storing or transmitting EPHI. And this is when we are looking on the hospital campus itself. And everything is, it becomes even harder because now, because of COVID, you have a lot of remote workers. You have a lot of interconnectivity of the IT people or the information security that are working from their homes, and they need some ability to do a remote management on those devices. We are seeing sometimes more than 100 different connections of different vendors that are using a remote connection to manage their devices, like GE, Philips, etc. And we're seeing more and more assets of the hospital that resides on the cloud. So when we are now at CyberMDX, we are trying to build a security suite to tackle all of these challenges that you've seen in the previous slide. So basically, it compounds of 4 main pillars. The first one is the ability to do asset inventory and track on each one of the devices. So you can see here 360 visibility with threat detection. So now you will not only know that you have a point of sale in your network or tablet with some telehealth app. We will try to give you the most in-depth granular data about the device itself. On top of that, to try to give you risk assessment and what are the preventive actions that you can take. And during my next slide, I will go more in depth. I think that we have a very unique approach here and something that we are getting great feedback from our customers. in the way that how we are tackling and how we are helping you prioritizing the risks and helping you to understand where you should start and what you should do with that. The detection and response piece. So we're hearing a lot of attacks that are happening in hospitals. And one of the problems is that there is a very perfect place for hackers to hide. I mean, if some hacker is being able to put a malware on your surveillance camera, the ability of traditional tools, the ability to detect it and to understand that there is something very suspicious in your network, that a surveillance camera is starting to communicate with your patient monitors. So this is something that once you have the great asset inventory and the ability to classify each one of the devices, then the ability to detect abnormal traffic in your network is something that is much easier. And the last piece, and we will discuss more in depth about it later, is compliance and governance. We are trying to provide a specific tool that we call it the control center, that basically, this is a real game changer. It gives the power to you, the user, and basically you can ask any question on each one of the attributes and data that we are collecting on each one of the connected devices in your network. So you can create, let's say, a rule that please show me all of the connected devices that are running this operating system, but are not doing, I don't know, let's say they don't have an antivirus. And those devices, that are supporting an antivirus. So this is an example of something that in a matter of a few clicks, and then you can decide which action do you want to take. Send me an email about it. Please deploy an antivirus. Open a ServiceNow ticket about it, etc. So poll question number 2, Rich.
Great. So poll question number 2, what's the maturity level of your medical device security program? Same thing, enter in the chat or the questions area. None in place today, seeking or researching for one, recently tested or implemented, mature and working well, and mature but not satisfactory. I expect we'll probably see a pretty good mix here. So let us know what you think. Yeah, interesting responses. So go ahead, Ido, back to you.
What is the top? I would like to, it's interesting for me to, what are you getting there?
It looks like B and C and a little bit of D. So
second researcher for one recently tested. Okay. I'm happy to hear that a few of you do feel that you are mature and working well. So now I will dive more in depth about how we are seeing the problems with medical devices. So we have a pretty simple concept, and it's basically tries to look on the device itself, and basically when you come up with an attacker perspective. So what the attacker can do with those devices and how they can attack those devices. So the basic thing that the medical device do is communicate once you are connecting into the network, of course, is to do some legitimate traffic. Okay, it's if it's an imaging machine, it will send a DICOM traffic to the PAC server. There is also a very legitimate traffic that can come up from VA scanners that, let's say, are trying to check which open ports do you have on your IoT devices, or there is very legit that the vendor, let's say GE, will be able to maintain and log into the medical device. On the other hand, you want to have a very clear understanding and very quickly if there is a specific malware on the medical device itself, and we do see that sometimes during the onboarding process, medical devices can come with internal malware on them already from the manufacturer, or because you got, I don't know, you bought a medical device that was already been infected and you bought it from other HDO. And of course, if there is any internal threat that is happening in your network currently. The third types of interactions that can come up with your medical devices when it's related to internal network, it's something that is it's not required traffic. So let's say a misconfiguration that accidentally one device is able to communicate with a device that it's not supposed to. So a common example that we are seeing is the UPnP. UPnP is a protocol that a lot of IoT devices are using by default when they're connected to the network, and they're basically doing broadcasting and trying to collect as much data as possible on the other devices on their network. And we do see sometimes, let's say, X-ray devices that do answer to this UPnP traffic. And this can show us that, okay, maybe there is nothing malicious that is happening right now in the network, but we can witness the lack of the ability of different devices to communicate with another. So with the lack of segmentation in the network, so basically now we can understand that the security cameras can communicate with medical devices. And I'm going back again to this specific example because we had few examples of this type of attack specifically in the last few months. Now there is another layer of traffic that come up with this medical device, and this relates to something that goes outside of your perimeter. So of course that most of the vendors today are not many times not come physically, or at least not in the beginning, and they're doing a support from remotely. And also we want the device itself to be able to get updates, software version upgrades, sometimes even the operating system. So this, again, a very legit traffic that goes from the medical devices through the internal network and the external network. On the other hand, there is some there are things that we want to know as soon as possible, again, and if possible to block beforehand, is the ability of malware. So let's say that if there is a malware on this medical device, we don't want this malware to have the ability to communicate with the control center with this device. Okay. Another thing that can happen, again, it's medical devices that maybe are going to a bad reputation IP addresses. So we don't want them to do that because this is, again, a tech vector against those devices. And as it was in the internal network, there are something that is in between. For example, something that we see very common, staff of hospitals that are browsing from medical workstation or even medical devices that they have, let's say, for example, a Internet Explorer browser, and they're exploring sites like Facebook and others. And this, again, it's not something that puts their device on immediate risk, but it does imply to us that there is lack of compliance enforcement on this tool. So in front of this device, so there is a good chance that when this device will try to communicate with a malicious website, this traffic also will not be blocked. So once we are understanding this pretty basic concept of how medical devices are interacting, once we are connecting them to the Wi-Fi or to the Ethernet connection, and based on those layers, so we have the device, the internal network, and the external network, we built a very simple concept. If you want to do a risk management for your devices, so you should do device-centric risk management. And what it means, take these 3 layers that I just provided you, and we will show it to you in one place. And for each one of the layers, we will give you what are the problems and what you can do with that. So when it comes to on-device remediation, so if you have a default credential, so we will tell you, listen, you have some configuration issue on the device itself. If the device is not patched or there is no antivirus and you can do it. So on the first layer of the medical device, which is the physical device, we will provide you all of the remediations that you can do on the device itself. And many times, this is things that can be pushed by the biomed personnel, or they can do it by themselves, or many times with the vendors. Now there is the second piece of how medical devices are communicating, right? The second piece is the network itself. Here we do need a collaboration from the networking team. and to help you do a better segmentation of your network. And also here we have some unique approach which says, listen, whitelist is the best approach and gives you the best protection. Whitelist means that on each one of your connected medical devices, we will define specifically based on your traffic and our broad knowledge on how medical devices should communicate, and from hundreds of other sites that we saw this type of devices, there is a very pretty much monotonic pattern of how this device should communicate and with which entities. Okay, an infusion pump pretty much supposed to speak mostly with, so let's say Alaris infusion pumps with the integration server of Alaris. But sometimes, many times, I mean, whitelist is something that is very hard to develop and also to maintain because it's very strict and says, let's say that this infusion pump can communicate only with this IP address of integration server. But what happens if all of a sudden the integration server changes the IP address? So it's very hard to maintain. And this is why we providing another tool that we call it block list policy. And I will cover it more in depth in the next slide. But basically the approach says, listen, when you look on all of the tens of thousands of different vulnerabilities that are out there, less than 3% of them there is a real exploitation in the wild. And when we did a very good investigation on the most common attacks on hospitals, which are Ryuk attacks and others, so I will take Ryuk as an example. Mostly what happens is they're pretty much the hackers are using the same ports, the same services to exploit. So if it's a Windows machine, it's many times SMB, like the WannaCry, the Eternal Blue vulnerability. Many times it's RDP, which is like Bluekeep and Deja Blue. And when it comes to other devices, so again, there is some very limited ports and services that hackers are exploiting, are using it because they are looking for the most vulnerabilities that have that they can do a remote code execution most of the time, that they have the exploitation is pretty easy, or even you have it in the wild. And basically what we have seen that if we are blocking the most common services from being able to exploit those, you are reducing dramatically the attack surface and the probability of a bad adversary to hack into those devices. And it's something that is much easier to maintain and also to create. And the third layer is the ability that we want to control the external access control. So we want to limit a specific vendor to being able to control only the devices that are relevant to them. And we want to block any internet traffic that is not related to updating of the device itself. So now let's cover it a little bit more in depth. So now when we are understanding this concept of DCRM, the device-centric risk management, there is 5 main use cases that we are doing today in our product, and this is mostly what like 99% of our customers are doing with our product. And it starts with live inventory. Once you have that, now you can start. Once you have all of your devices and you really understand the devices, now you can start doing the ongoing device-centric risk management, the on-device network-based mitigation and external access control. And this is basically, let's say, covers what you have today. Okay, this is the live inventory that you have and the risk that you have currently in your environment. Now things are starting to become a little bit more complicated because the cyber world specifically is not static at all. So of course, that now that you have a very good understanding of what is your current risk and what is the prioritization, you do need to have some ability to adjust yourself, because if tomorrow there is a new critical vulnerability, you do want the DCRM mechanism, the device-centric risk management, to being updated to the most common threats and vulnerabilities that are out there. Another very critical point is, okay, so we want to take care of all of the problems that we have today, but how we will solve the problem from the beginning, from the root. So we do believe that if we will have a strong onboarding process of new medical devices, so anytime that you guys will connect a new medical device to your network, and you understand in the first day or in the first minute what are the risks that this device is exposed to, um, then I mean this is the place to start. Okay, right? Just even before that the patients are starting to use the device. So we have a whole new use case that we're working with biomed personnel in order that you can sometimes even just connect the device in a lab environment, and we will like to provide you um, this is all the problems that you have. This is how you're working. Does the MDS2 requirements are, let's say that if the MDS2 file will say this device should have only Telnet and FTP, we will alert you about there is another port that is open, for example. It's something that happens many times. And the last one is ongoing compliance alignment. Again, you're living in all of us in a very dynamic world. So we want to give you the ability to define, let's say that you are working with NIST cybersecurity framework. So you are able in our solution, we are providing you all of the citations that are relevant for medical devices. And we are tracking it for you in automatic manner. And again, this is a day-to-day, I mean, something that you need to track in your day-to-day life. So the first use case is the live inventory. So we really try and we put a lot of effort, and I think that this is one of our key differentiator, the ability to bring a complete live inventory, provide to you all the clinical context. And by the way, we also, if we are missing something, we are hunting those devices. So as a prospect or as a customer, please, I mean, this is, we are working together. If anything is missing, we will find it. Our research team is on it. And we are always aiming to provide to you all of the visibility to all of your connected medical devices. So this is how it looks like in our dashboard. You will see basically a list of all the connected devices. In this case, an example of, you can see here the different types of connected medical devices. And if you will drill down to each one of the devices, you will be able to see a much deeper granularity on each one of the devices. One of the first things that we would like to do is to integrate with your SCCM, CMMS, sorry, and provide also the asset tag that you have. And then you can correlate the data that you have in your manual inventory and what we are able to provide to you in automatic manner. Another thing that we do see that is very important sometimes to the biomed personnel is the ability to upload, or that we are providing some of the manufacturer disclosure statement, and we are also automatically screen those devices and bring you relevant attributes. So for example, you can see here in the bottom that automatically once you are adding the medical device, the MDS square file, we're adding a tag, for example, that this device is not applicable for antivirus. Another unique thing that we're providing for you, the biomed personnel, is something that is called equipment function, that is basically something scoring that is between 1 and 10. 1 is non-patient related, and 10 is the highest score that a medical any device can get, which is a life-supporting device. And the interesting part is when we want to calculate the criticality level of a device. Now it's not only, we are not looking at it as an IT problem, like it's not only which type of operating system it is and what is the IP address, but we also take into consideration what is the equipment function, what is the FDA classification, and again, this is something that can be customized also with the biomed personnel. And once we are doing that, I think we have here something very powerful and also very engaging for the IT personnel and also the biomed people, because Now you're not only solving a security problem, you're really solving something that is related to patient safety and operational risk that you have in your organization. Okay. So this here I covered the visibility that you can see with regards to the different attributes of the devices. So this is on device, but now we want to see, as in the DCRM, the device-centric risk management concept. Now you want to see the interaction of these devices and to understand if something bad is happening. So another thing that we are providing is under the network tab of each one of your devices is all of the inbound and outbound traffic that this device is providing. So in this example, you can see that there is a red arrow because we know now to identify and detect an unauthorized access to your medical devices. In this case, it's based on the machine learning of our solution that detects that there is no any reasonable um, and it's something that we've, for example, never seen happening before, that the nurse PC is trying to manage a medical device through a telnet protocol. Rich?
Thank you. So, Ido talked a little bit about getting an accurate and live inventory. I think we have a few biomedical folks here, amongst other people. How do you keep your inventory up to date? Is this a manual update done internally? Is it a manual update that you outsource? Is it fully automated but lacks some of the details? Or is it fully automated with rich detail, model, firmware, location, etc.? Okay, so enter those in the chat. You see C and A. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, not too bad. Some automated, but some still manual. So, Ido, back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so use case number 2, ongoing device-centric risk management, is how we're providing this holistic, now how we're taking this concept of the different layer of the device, of how it connects to the network and how it behaves into the reality. So again, on the device itself, we will provide what are the different remediations that you can do. An example, install antivirus, change password. So this is how it looks in our solution. So in this example, you can see an alert about an MRI machines of GE with default credentials. So here, if you will go and you want to resolve this case, so we would have the exact description, and of course the recommended action will be to change the password and to close the tunnel port on the device to prevent additional connection. So this is something that many times the biomed people can do, or with the help of the manufacturer. So this is again something that you can do on the device itself, and it's dramatically reduce the risk because of course that the default password is something that is very easy. I mean, easy target for the bad guys. Another example of things, insights that we're providing on the device itself is outdated software version. So in this example, we have here Roche a Cobas 6500 machine with outdated software version. So again, one of the things that we're doing is collecting all of our big data of application versions from all of our deployments, and then we can tell you, hey guys, there is much more up-to-date version to this device. And as a best practice, you should always be in the most up-to-date, and maybe you have some even more functionality and so on. So again, this is something that once the biomed personnel is familiar with, they can work with, they can start work and fix it. Another example is missing antivirus. So in this case is parked medical electronics machine, and we understand that we are not seeing any antivirus on the device itself. And here we are referring you to the MDF file and tell you, listen, you can deploy antivirus, even the manufacturer recommends you to do so. So this is a very good mitigation that you can do on the device itself. And on the other hand, there is places that we know it, we learned from your MDS2 files that there is no applicable antivirus. So in this example of GE ultrasound, in the MDS2 file, we can learn that this device doesn't support anti-malware software. So you should know this type of protection is not available for you. And of course, it puts the device more at risk. And sometimes comes the question, okay, so when should I do that? Let's say that I want to change the password. So we also provide to you insight with regards to the utilization of the devices, and you can learn when is the hours that you are not utilizing those devices or not utilizing them a lot. And of course, it is better to do those upgrades, patches, etc., configuration changes during those hours. Now, many times, and this is the main problem with medical devices, you cannot really solve the problem only on the device itself. It many times run Windows XP or a very old operating system of Linux or some other VxWorks real-time operating system that you cannot upgrade for some reason. It happens a lot, especially on medical devices. The vendor is not supporting it. They don't know how the device will behave, or sometimes just, as I said before, just not support the ability to upgrade the device, the application or the operating system or the firmware version. So in this case, you will be able to see in our solution all of the different vulnerabilities the device is exposed to. So in this example, I chose GE devices, a city of GE. And you can see here what are the exploitable ports. 21, which is FTP, 22, which is SSH, and so on, 23, Telnet. And here the solution is something that you need or you can do with your network. So one option is the whitelist approach. So if you will click here on view recommended access list, we are tailoring for you which type of traffic should be allowed. So of course that a DICOM traffic should be allowed. And on this specific site, it was on a very specific port. So we will allow an outbound traffic of a DICOM from the city device. We will allow to the vendor to access to this device, do some outbound traffic for upgrades and etc. But that's it, guys. I mean, and think about it. Any other entity in the network that will be hacked will not be able to, once we will impose those restrictions in your network access control or your firewall, inter-VLAN firewall, then this device will be protected much better. Another concept is the blacklist, the block list, sorry. So in this case let's take this ultrasound of Philips. Again, will be able to see all of the different vulnerability, and then you can select a policy. In this case, it's a block list policy. As I mentioned before, whitelist is the best option that you can choose, but it's very hard to do it, and it's all very hard to maintain. But an easier option that you can do is the concept of block list. So you can choose there is a different levels of how restrictness you can provide. And we also will tell you how much risk reduction this will provide to you. So let's say that you have this ultrasound of Philips. And if you will enforce level number 1, it means that RDP connection will not be allowed. We will block any traffic that is related to all of these specific applications. And listen, more than 90% of the vulnerabilities that we are seeing that are being exploited over the wild are using these ports. Okay, it's SQL, RDP, it's SMB, it's pretty much happening every time. And if you see here, we saw 4 different vulnerabilities that we are aware that this device is exposed to. So in this case, if we will just impose level 1 and we will block only these protocols, 3 out of 4 of the vulnerabilities will be mitigated. And of course, the risk reduction will be 75%. And again, the big issue here is that this is something that is much more sustainable. easy to maintain and to enforce. The last piece is the external access control, which is, for example, if you want to make sure that the X-ray devices of Philips, you don't want them to have any outbound traffic to the internet, so it's something very easy to do from our automated control center mechanism. So, in a nutshell, and sum up the DCRM in action, is give you a very strong tool of where should I start and what can I do with that. So we're trying to provide to you in a very concise manner what are all of the different issues that we have, what is the total risk score that you have on specific groups of medical devices, and what are the different actions that you can do, and what is the reduction in the risk that we will provide to you. Okay. Third use case, as I mentioned before, is a new vulnerability. All the concept of the device-centric risk management is based on also where should I start and what should I do, and where should I start sometimes can change. So we also give you all the time new insights about new vulnerabilities and suggestions, or maybe you should change your prioritization based on what really happening in the wild. When you have new vulnerabilities that are being exposed. Use case number 4, this is something that we see a lot of our biomed customers are using, is the onboarding. So we are providing this specific dashboard that I'm showing to you all of the new medical devices that you have in your network, and what are the specific attributes that you're mostly interested in. As biomed, does this device is being scanned? It can put the device at risk if it's being scanned in a very aggressive manner. It can crash the device. Does this device have any vulnerabilities? Does it have MDS2, etc., etc. And again, the best practice is to do that and to understand the situation of the device before you are starting to really use it and connect patients to do examination. And this is a really good process of understanding where we are standing in the first day that before you are starting to use a new medical device. Rich?
All right, coming down to the wire. Poll question 4. Do you currently actively scan or query your medical devices? A, no, we do not scan or query them. B, no, but we would like that capability. C, no, and we would not want to do that. D, yes, only with a custom template. And E, yes. So again, answer in the question section of the GoToWebinar meeting interface. Good. Yeah, it's the A and B and E, right? So, okay, some of you are doing it, some aren't. There you go. Back to you, Ido.
Yeah, thank you. So with regards to scanning medical devices, we don't see it as a best practice to do it with traditional tools that that are scanning your servers and also scanning your medical devices. Of course, that a scanner can handle a lot of TCP connection in a matter of few seconds or minutes, and this is mostly what scanners are doing. They're trying to check a lot of open ports and sometimes even tries to exploit different vulnerabilities to see how the devices behaves. And when it comes to medical devices, this really puts the devices at risk. But we do have in our solution the ability to do something that we call active querying, is something very limited that querying only specific ports, and it sometimes can be very helpful in order to understand the device better, or understand that you do have an open port that no one ever tried to use, but it's also very helpful for your risk assessment. So if you will have any more questions with regards to that, my email will be presented in the end of the presentation, and we will be more than happy to come back to you and discuss about it. Use case number 5, it's about compliance alignment and governance. So in this print screen, you can see how we are tracking NIST framework. So for example, one of the citation is track daily new assets, or you want to track all of your deprecated OS. So this is something pretty easy. I mean, the NIST framework, for example, comes out of the box. And there are also things that you can adjust as a customer to your own compliance restrictions or rules. And it's pretty easy. I mean, again, you can choose which one of the attributes of the device and tell, I want to track on all of my medical devices from site X that the guy that is, or the woman that is assigned to manage these devices. This one with those vulnerabilities, with this criticality level, and also what is the action about it. I want a recurring report into my email or into ServiceNow once in a week about it. Or if a specific group of devices is communicating with a specific country that I'm concerned of, please block it immediately in the firewall, so on and so on. Rich, poll question number 5.
I think this is the last one, right? Which best describes your status on cybersecurity framework? We're planning to use one. We are currently using one. We do not have a plan for this, or you don't know. Good. B, hey. D, okay, well, should know, right? But yeah, looks like some are doing it. Yeah, again, some are using one and some are planning to use one. So that's good. Ido, back to you.
Thank you, Rich. So consider this, guys. Medical devices are rapidly growing in the amount and the cybersecurity that they're exposing your organization. We do believe in CyberMDX that the device-centric risk approach can minimize damage and help you to maximize the protection. Again, once it's not a very the concept is not complicated, and this is the beauty of that. Each one of you can understand that if you're taking all of the things that you can do on the device itself, on the internal network, and on the perimeter, this is basically how you can block the bad guys from, in the end, getting access to the device or do a denial of service or manipulating any data. And another thing is that automation is something that you really needs in your toolbox. You are seriously, I mean, to be a biomed personnel today is a very hard task, and you have thousands of connected devices, and you do need this help in the ability to track of everything that you have in your network in every given second. Thank you very much for being with us. We will be more than happy to get questions from you.
Thank you so much to both of you for this presentation. As a reminder to our audience, if you have a question, please use the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. We do have a few questions that have come in. Let me ask this one first. What is required to deploy your solution?
Okay, I will take this one, Rich. So basically, there is, we call it a discovery meeting that we bring one of our solution architect to understand the topology of your network. We need to understand with you where you have medical devices and how they're communicating in your network. We put something that's called a sensor that basically collects all of the traffic in your network, and then based on the medical traffic and the other traffic that we're seeing in the network, we are able to identify all of the devices. So it's mostly a discovery meeting that mostly takes about an hour. And after that, there is some technical things like provide the ability to our sensor from your internal network to communicate with our cloud. And we also do some integrations with other solutions that you have in your network. So if you want to move forward and, for example, do CMMS integration or a firewall integration, this is of course something that is also part of the deployment phase. Any other questions?
We do have a few more. Our next one is, what enforcers do I need to implement allow list or block list policies?
Okay,
Ido,
cool.
you should probably take that one too.
Yeah, sure. So that's a good question. So basically, we are a passive solution. We are not touching your network. We are not touching your medical devices. And now comes those recommendations, right, about what you need to do or you can do with regards to reducing the attack surface using from the network side. So a lot of hospitals have solutions like network access control, Cisco ISE, ForScout, Aruba ClearPass. So this is one option of very good enforcers. Another type of solution is firewalls. The best ones is the ones that are inter-VLAN, which means the firewall that is in the center of your organization, and the traffic, let's say, from imaging devices and your servers is going through. So this is another place that we can send these rules.
Okay, our next question is, after you have discovered a device and you see a vulnerability or a security event, how do you identify the device owner and dispatch them to correct the device?
Okay, cool. So, so there are two options. One is if we are doing CMMS integration, let's say based on the serial number of the device. So we can take this data from the biomed data. Another thing that you can do is automatically through our solution is to create the control center rule. This is something that we are calling it, and you can say all of the devices from this type or this specific vendor or this specific location and so on, and assign them to a specific user. And then you can also choose what to do with it. You want to just assign it, or you want to add a specific tag, send an email about it, open a ticket at ServiceNow, and so on.
Excellent. We are out of time now, but I do want to thank you both for your time today, for a great presentation. I'd also like to encourage everyone in the audience to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the products and services that they provide to our industry. Please visit cybermdx.com. A quick reminder that you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download your certificate immediately after the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, please contact us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We will be back next week with another webinar. Please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you all and have a great day.